Oh, could
Yeah,
you?
we're live now.
Thank you. And the first thing, whether or not we're recording, is that please switch off your your telephones or make them silent, please. I don't want any interruptions. Yes. Oh, I need to be closer to the microphone. Is that better? Yes, please silence your mobile phones or switch them off, please. It's 20 quid to the Mayor's Fund if that doesn't happen, if we get a disturbance. Thank you. So welcome everybody to this meeting of this evening's planning, and welcome to the visiting councillors and those attending online. Right. Do we have any apologies for absence, please?
I've received apologies from Councillor Barnard, Councillor Smith and Councillor Mackenzie Boyle.
Thank you. The minutes. These are to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the committee held last month, 18th of July. But I have a matter for the minutes that needs to be added because since the last committee, I've been advised that the motion raised at the last committee meeting would not fall under the terms of the planning committee, which does not have any policy-making remit. As such, I've spoken with the Assistant Director Planning, who has provided information on noise-related guidance that the Council could consider taking forward. This has been welcomed by the motion proposer, and as such, I intend for this matter to be pursued outside the formal planning committee. Once a draft of the guidance has been prepared and discussed with the executive member, I have asked that it be shared and discussed with the members of the committee. I hope that's okay. So with that addition, may I move that the minutes of the last meeting be approved as a correct record? And do I have a seconder? Councillor Virgo? Thank you. All those in favour, please. Thank you. Good. Thank you very much. And thank you. Declarations of interest. Members are asked to declare any disclosable pecuniary or affected interests in respect of any matter to be considered at this meeting. Any member with a disclosable pecuniary interest in a matter should withdraw from the meeting when the matter is under consideration and should notify the Democratic Services officer in attendance that they are withdrawing as they have such an interest. If the disclosable pecuniary interest is not entered onto the register of the member's interests, the monitoring officer must be notified of the interest within 28 days. I don't know if I have to declare that I'm no, everybody ward members, aren't they? So that's all right. I'm just a ward member for one. Urgent items of business. Are there any urgent items, please?
No non-notified, Chair.
Thank you. So the first item is for the Whitegates Mushroom Castle, Winkfield Road. I think it's Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Margaret McKevitt will be presenting this item tonight. This is an outline application for the erection of up to 42 new dwellings with ancillary infrastructure and open space, with vehicular access from Gardeners Road, and all matters are reserved except for details of access. This application was previously considered by the Planning Committee in September 2023, with a resolution to approve subject to conditions and a Section 106 agreement. No new plans have been submitted, no changes have been made to the application, but one of the Section 106 measures offered by the applicant was to secure the provision of a pedestrian cycle access to Chavey Down Road along Mushroom Castle or through the adjacent Coronation Hall. The applicant has now advised that these provisions cannot be secured. Mushroom Castle is not an adopted road and is not under the ownership or control of the applicant. In addition to providing a formal pedestrian and cycle link down Mushroom Castle, highways would require street lighting to be provided, which would require widening of this road for the lighting to be safely provided. The applicant does not own the land alongside this road to allow the widening to take place. Coronation Hall, adjacent, is owned by Bracknell Forest, but the Parish Council hold a lease on the site. The Parish Council would not permit a pedestrian and cycle route to be provided through the Coronation Hall grounds, as they believe it would interfere with the operation of the hall. Pedestrian and cycle access to the site can be secured through Gardeners Road, where vehicular access has been secured. This site is an allocated housing site in the Bracknell Forest local plan for 40 dwellings. The policy LP14 that allocates the site does not require pedestrian and cycle links to Chavey Down Road. Using Gardeners Road will lengthen the pedestrian and cycle journey time from the site to Coronation Hall and to the closest bus stop in Chavey Down Road. On the site, see, this is Mushroom Castle. The closest bus stop will be here. But, if we see on the next site along, the green and the blue routes do show other routes to bus stops in the area. Gardeners Road will lengthen the pedestrian and cycle journey time, and the journey to the bus stop, which serves a number 299 bus service, is relatively limited, only 3 days a week, but it does connect to the Bracknell Town Centre. The walking distance from the site to the bus stop on Chavey Down Road via Mushroom Castle would be around 300 metres. The walking distance from the site to the bus stop on Chavey Down Road via Coronation Road, which is the blue route shown there, is around 800 metres. Coronation Drive also has a bus stop on Forest Road, which is walking distance of around 500 metres from the site. The closest primary school to the site is Winkfield St Mary's, access from Winkfield Road. The walking distance from the site to this school is already 1.2 kilometres, so it's not within a short walking distance, but it's not worsened by the lack of the link to Chavey Down Road. And the National Design Guide of 2021 defines a walkable distance as one where local facilities are no more than a 10-minute walk, which is 800 metres away. The application site will be within this walkable distance to bus stops if Gardeners Road is used. The recommendation is that following the completion of a planning obligation under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act relating to the measures set out in the report, which excludes the initial pedestrian link to Chavey Down Road, that the Assistant Director Planning be authorised to approve the application, subject to the conditions set out in the report, amended to or added and deleted as necessary as the Assistant Director Planning considers necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, I believe we have public speaking. No, it's withdrawn. Right, thank you very much. So, questions for the officers, please, members. Councillor Virgo.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Virgo speaking. Could I ask, Margaret, did we get a 10% biodiversity on this site? Please.
Through you, Chair. Yes, I believe we did. In the report, 2023, it covers B&G in the 106.
Okay, thank you. Second question, if I could. It's more of a request, really. I wonder if we could see the traffic management plan shared with the committee. Whether it's a question at this point, Chair, or whether I could just mention it on the summing up, if you would accept it.
Through you, Chair. Yes, I think Councillor Virgo is just requesting that any details submitted pursuant to the condition relating to traffic management be brought back to committee, and that is no problem. We can note that.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? No? Then... Oh, sorry, Councillor Gore, please do.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gore here. What I wanted to ask is, I recall from the September Planning Committee that the access through Gardeners Road was going to be a sort of stop-start arrangement, so traffic would have to wait while traffic exited and entered the site. So I'm wondering, and I just heard the planning officer say that cycle access could be organised through Gardeners Road, and I just wondered how that would be if there was if it was a tight arrangement for cars already.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Through you. When the application was considered in September, obviously the access to Gardeners Road would have also considered that it would also be used by pedestrians and cyclists. The proposal, which wasn't shown on the plans, was an extra, if you like. And at the time, the highways officers had no concerns with the access arrangements, which would include pedestrians and cyclists as well as vehicles.
Thank you. Councillor Gore again, yeah.
Thank you very much. Just a further question on that. Obviously, we haven't seen the outline plans for this site. We only know of the access arrangements. So, in your opinion, will the removal of the arrangement for pedestrians and cyclists have any impact on the overall plan?
Through you, Chair. As the Councillor correctly says, we haven't determined a layout yet, although in September an illustrative layout was shown. But there's no reason to believe that there'll be any impact on the layout by removing the access. The site is still the same size. It could be that there would be boundary treatment instead of a pedestrian access in the corner of the site leading to Mushroom Castle or to Coronation Hall, but no implications for layout or the number of properties that could be served on the site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, members. So I will move the recommendation on page 14 of the agenda pack to approve. Would you like to discuss, comment, members? Or can it be seconded, please? That's the first thing. Councillor Collins to second.
I second that.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Virgo.
Just briefly, Chair, really. The officers already talked about the fact that the exit, which was proposed by the developer, they couldn't get agreement to that. Of course, it doesn't mean to say that people can actually use it anyway, because there's nothing to stop them walking down Mushroom Castle or for that much cycling, I think. It is a worry, but, you know, there's nothing we can do about it because we've agreed it, but I think it needs to be said. And I was always concerned about the drainage and still remain about the drainage. You know, but all I can say is it's a worry and a concern, but there's nothing I can do about it. But I think it needs to be raised at this committee. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else to comment? Has Jenny said anything online? No, I don't think so. She hasn't raised her hand. No. Would you like to comment at all? Vice Chair? No. No. In that case, may I go to the vote? All those in favour of accepting? Those against? Or abstain? Thank you.
That's unanimous.
Thanks. Next one. Oh dear, what page does that start on? Sorry, page 59 of the report.
There is an amendment.
And an amendment on the supplementary report, page 3. Thank you. I think it's
Thank you, Chair.
planning.
This application relates to land known as the former Park and Ride site north of Peacock Lane, and was the subject of a member site visit on Saturday. The site extends 2.66 hectares and is located to the south of the A329 Berkshire Way and east of Vigar Way at the Jennets Park roundabout. It lies within a defined settlement and is bounded to the south by dwellings in Webster Close, which comprise 2- and 3-storey houses, and 3 blocks of flats which rise to a maximum height of 6 storeys. At the southeastern end of the site lies the Grade 2 listed Peacock Farm and associated outbuildings. To the east lies Jardine Place, a development of 2-storey houses and a block of 3-storey flats. The land is currently undeveloped, however, has had fill deposited on it from the Jennets Park development. It is currently overgrown with regenerative planting, providing some screening to the A329. The site sits at a relative low point in the landscape on this side of the A329, with the land falling south to north from Jennets Park and the carriageways of the surrounding road network being set above the site level. The site is allocated within the Bracknell Forest Local Plan for residential development for approximately 100 units, with a developable area being identified at the western end of the site to take account of an electricity cable easement and areas at risk of surface water flooding. At the eastern end of the site, there is an area of land which was used as a storage compound for the development of Webster Close. This is a residual area from the SALP allocation, which previously allocated a wider site for approximately 182 dwellings, 128 of which have been constructed as Webster Close. This application was originally submitted in 2021, although pre-application discussions have been held since 2017. Prior to the submission of the application, the applicants engaged in a design review, which is an independent process by a specialist body where a team of expert urban designers, architects and landscape architects assess a proposal. This slide shows the scheme considered by the design review panel. The design review process led to a number of recommendations which are set out in paragraph 9.7 of the report, with the key issues being that development should respond to the gateway setting of the site by using building heights. It should improve pedestrian and cycleway connections through the site. It should increase the amount of open space provision above that shown in the considered scheme, and it should revisit the architectural language of the buildings. The scheme before you has been the subject of numerous revisions over a 3-year period and now proposes a total of 119 dwellings, providing a mix of 1-, 2- and 3-bedroom units as set out in paragraph 5.1 of the report. These will be provided within 2 distinct areas identified as the Gateway area and the Peacock Farm area, which are located at the western and eastern ends of the site respectively. The central embankment area remains free of development to provide an area of public open space. At the western side of the site, 2 buildings are proposed which will enclose an area of open space. Building 1 rises to a maximum height of 12 storeys and drops down to 5 storeys closest to the existing building, Kemp House, which lies within Webster Close. Building 2 is L-shaped and serves to enclose an area of open space which provides a pocket park and an area of surface level parking with a podium above which provides a landscape garden with bridge access from the adjacent buildings. This slide shows the layout of this part of the site with the surface level parking. And this following slide shows the layout at first floor level with the landscape garden being accessed via bridges from the adjoining buildings. The height and design of the buildings in this area have been carefully considered. The design of building 1 is angled to ensure that it presents a slim, elegant profile to key views with an articulated roof to provide a distinctive silhouette. Good use of materials and detailing is shown in order to break up the mass of both this and building 2. This slide shows the eastern and western elevations of building 1. This is the northern elevation, which will face the A329 and shows the articulated roof form. And this slide shows the elevations for building 2. And the next 2 slides show the building's relationships with each other, enclosing the central area of open space. So if you can see my cursor, this is the podium area with the landscape garden above, which is being enclosed by the 2 buildings. and this shows it from the southern aspect and the western side of the site. And this is a close-up showing the landscape podium garden above the surface level parking, which will use feature metal fins to support green wall style planting. It is accepted that Building 1 is of a larger scale than those in the immediate vicinity. However, the design review panel made clear that in urban design terms, it would be appropriate to have a landmark building in this area, which should use height to announce its presence and the entry into Bracknell. The site sits at a relative low point in the landscape, with the land rising to the south from within Jennetts Park. Members will also have noticed at the site visit that the Fujitsu building provides another example of a tall building outside the town centre, which rises to 11 stories and which is set on higher ground to the southeast of the application site. As a result, it's not considered that the height of the building would be materially harmful to the existing character. The relationship of buildings 1 and 2 to existing development has been considered, and they maintain a minimum of 31 metres from either of the existing blocks of flats. Whilst an existing FOG, which is a flat over garages, would lie within 15 metres of the podium parking, this has no habitable room windows in its rear elevation that would be impacted by the development or use of this area. Future residents would be provided with a good standard of amenity through the use of private balconies and access to the podium garden directly from the building via bridge walkways. A noise impact assessment has been submitted which identifies noise mitigation measures to be incorporated into the design of the units and applied to the most exposed of the private garden areas, and these measures will be secured by condition. Although, and as referred to in the supplementary report, 3 ground floor flats within Building 1 do not meet BRE's guidelines for sunlight and daylight in instances where a deep living kitchen diner is proposed. However, the main living area would be provided with adequate light, with the compromise only being within the kitchen areas at the back of the room. It is not considered that this failure to meet the BRE guideline in full would provide sufficient reason to refuse the application. At the Peacock Farm end of the site, 2 4-storey blocks are proposed, providing a total of 14 units, together with 12 2- and 3-storey houses provided in terraces of 3. These dwellings are considered to have an acceptable relationship to existing development in Webster Close and Jardine Place, and their design has had regard to the setting of the Peacock Farm listed buildings. This slide shows the design of the 4-storey building, which will accommodate 7 flats with associated cycle and refuse storage provided at ground floor level. This shows the design of the central terrace of 2-storey dwellings. And this slide shows one of the terraces of 3-storey dwellings. The central area of the site is to be retained as open space. An indicative landscape strategy has been submitted, which shows the provision of seating and play areas, and more details would be secured under the terms of the landscaping condition. This area provides for surface water attenuation in accordance with the drainage strategy that is considered acceptable by the drainage officer. Along the length of the public open space, a pedestrian cycle link is shown, which provides an accessible link through the site from Webster Close, with the intention that it create a link through to the pedestrian footbridge over the A329. This will require use of third-party land. However, initial contact has been made with SSE, who own the substation, and they've indicated a willingness to work with the council to achieve this link, and the Section 106 funding has already been secured to achieve this. The scheme has been revised since the adoption of the local plan and provides 35% affordable housing, which meets the council's priority needs. As set out in paragraph 9.83 of the report, given the longevity of the scheme, there are some compromises made, particularly in relation to the proportion of affordable rented to social rented housing. However, since these provide a higher percentage of houses and larger 3-bed affordable units when compared with the market mix, these are considered acceptable. The scheme also meets the requirement of policy LP 38 in terms of accessibility. Other matters that members will wish to be aware of and which are covered in the report is that the scheme will provide parking to meet the standards set out in the Council's adopted parking SPD, is considered acceptable in terms of fire safety design following consultation with both the Health and Safety Executive and Berkshire Fire and Rescue. It provides an appropriate strategy for surface water drainage. It's demonstrated that future residents will not suffer from poor air quality issues and that sufficient noise attenuation can be provided to properties and garden areas. It will require an upgrade to the existing sewer infrastructure, with a condition being recommended to prevent occupation until these works have been completed, consistent with the matrix of conditions that have been agreed between Thames Water and West Oxfordshire District Council. It will deliver a zero carbon ready development with high levels of fabric energy efficiency and use air source heat pumps. And it will provide 10% biodiversity net gain and appropriate SPA mitigation. In assessing the application, which has the potential to impact upon the significance of the Peacock Farm group of listed buildings, it's first necessary to undertake a heritage balance as set out in the report. The Council's heritage consultant has advised that the development would cause less than substantial harm to the significance of the adjacent listed buildings by virtue of visual harm to their setting. Great weight is given to this harm, which is required to be weighed against the public benefits of the scheme. In this instance, it's considered that the scheme provides significant public benefit by contributing to the Council's supply of housing, including the provision of affordable units which meet the Council's priority needs. Other economic, mainly short-term benefits would also arise. The development will also improve connectivity within the local area by providing improved connections from Webster Close to existing links in Jennets Park and providing a footpath / cycleway through the site. In addition, the scheme offers some heritage benefit by providing an area of landscaping between the site's boundary with Peacock Farm, which will provide a visual buffer to the setting of the listed buildings. On balance, therefore, it's considered that the less than substantial harm caused to the significance of the listed buildings is outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme, and that approval of the application would be consistent with the statutory duty to have special regard to the desirability of preserving the setting of any listed buildings. Turning now to the planning balance, the principle of the development is entirely consistent with the development plan, which allocates this site for residential development. The scheme has been subject to multiple revisions since its first submission and now proposes a total of 119 units. The design of the buildings have been carefully considered, and whilst it proposes development of a significant scale on the site, it's considered that the scheme makes good use of available land and would not cause material harm to the character of the area or amenities of adjoining occupiers. All other issues relating to traffic generation, parking, drainage, noise attenuation, flood risk, BNG, potential contamination, air quality, sustainable construction and SPA mitigation have been addressed within the report and through recommended conditions or the requirements of the Section 106 agreement. Accordingly, the recommendation is for approval, subject to the prior completion of a Section 106 agreement and conditions as set out in Section 11 of the report on page 95 of the agenda. And I'm just going to go through some photos quickly for members who weren't able to attend the site visit. So this is a view from Jennets Park across the roundabout at the entrance to Webster Close. This is a view into the site with Kemp House on the right. This is a closer view of Kemp House and with the fog in the foreground showing that it's got no habitable room windows in the rear elevation. This is a view across the site looking northwest to the Vigar Road roundabout. This is a view looking east across the site with Kemp House and then Monarch Apartments beyond. And this is moving down the site, again just showing Monarch Apartments on the right-hand side. This is a view along the site looking back in the opposite direction, looking west. This is a view from within the site looking across to dwellings within Webster Close, showing their existing character. This is the area previously used as a construction compound with views of properties in Jardine Place beyond. And this shows the substation just to their north. This shows the closest property within Jardine Place. This is a view from the Peacock Farm car park towards the site. And this is a view from the pedestrian bridge looking across the site with the proposed 12-storey building being proposed within this area here. This is a view also from the pedestrian bridge but looking in the opposite direction and showing the Fujitsu building emerging from the tree cover. And this final one is again a view from the pedestrian bridge, just showing the context of the site in relation to the A329M. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. A very comprehensive report. Any questions for the officers, please? Officer. I beg your pardon. Councillor Virgo,
I've got quite a few actually. Sorry to.
step by step.
Yeah. The first thing is about noise, and I know you've given us a full comprehensive picture of the noise. I'm still really concerned about the noise, to be honest with you, particularly at the lower level. And I wondered why we aren't putting a acoustic fence all the way around, or at least some kind of, swaying of the sound coming from the dual carriageway, because when it's raining, it is quite a sound on that tarmac. That's the first question. I'll do all these questions if you like, or do you want to take one by one?
One by one, I think. Thank
Okay.
you.
Through you, Chair, and then I think we also have the Environmental Health Officer on the line who can perhaps
Thank you, that's really
amplify
helpful,
things.
yeah.
But certainly there's an acoustic report was submitted with the application that assesses the existing noise from the A329 on the site and provides a comprehensive raft of mitigation measures, both in terms of the design of the buildings and also in terms of acoustic fencing that would need to be provided around some of the more exposed garden areas. And as previously mentioned, this would be secured by condition. We have considered the possibility of having further acoustic fencing to protect the open space, but in consultation with the landscape officer, she felt it would be preferable to provide some noise mitigation through planting rather than acoustic fencing. I don't know if the Environmental Health Officer wants to comment further, but I would just note that the landscaping condition does allow for the provision of further acoustic fencing if the developer were minded to provide it. But I think it would be hard for us to insist in it in this instance. Thank you, Chair.
Environmental Officer?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to reiterate what Joe has explained to the committee, in that it is a range of mitigation measures that are being proposed to protect the future residents, whether it be an acoustic fence, close board fencing in other areas, as well as a combination of design features such as no balconies overlooking the north elevation, and in a variety of ventilation measures to enable that the internal noise levels are not exceeded. And so dependent on the location within the development to the differing sort of thermal double glazing and type of acoustic ventilation ventilators that will be installed.
Thank you very much.
Could I have
Further
a supplementary on that,
questions?
please?
Yes, please.
I think that's all fine and dandy, except if you're going to put, for instance, trees there, and I'm not sure I understand if we are or not. The thing I worry about that is the trees are going to be not very high because you're going to plant them and they'll take a long time to grow. So I think the committee would like some form of understanding that it's all very well saying mitigation, but if you're in a flat and you've got to close all the windows in the middle of 40 degrees heat, that's not going to actually work very well, I don't think. So I still go back to the fact that we should look at this more closely, and somehow the committee should reconsider this on more evidence, because whoever's going to live in those flats might well encompass. I don't want to go on about this because it should be a question, but the sound will be a huge problem. We've all driven down that road, and it can be extremely busy in rush hour. In fact, I've seen it queued back right the way to the roundabouts, actually, going back to Reading.
Okay, thanks.
Through you, Chair, I would just point out that the noise impact assessment that was submitted was comprehensive in nature and did actually take into account the instances where windows would not be openable because of noise issues. I don't know if the Environmental Health Officer can explain that in a bit more detail, but I know it was definitely covered in the noise impact assessment that we had submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, the noise assessment does go into great detail in the mitigation section, and it does explain that in certain circumstances within development, thermal double glazing with triple vents will be provided, but in other locations there'll be more acoustic louvers. So it is a combination of different types of mitigation to be provided, but also to add that we need to take into consideration the element of overheating. So that is taken into consideration regarding these acoustic louvers or mechanical ventilation system to be installed, which would be decided at via the building control process.
Right, thank you. Next question.
Yeah,
please.
I'd like to go back on the summing up on that, please. The next question is really about EV infrastructure and solar cells, really. Obviously, it's quite impressive that we've got quite a long way on this, but have we got solar cells on the roof?
Please.
No, an energy statement has been submitted, and the applicants, it's been discussed with the applicants as to whether or not PV cells should be provided. The answer is that they're not going to be, and the proposal is to use air source heat pumps in order to meet our climate change policies. And as the applicants have pointed out, that they're not required to provide PV cells in this instance, which is correct. I think the other thing I would say is that it's not always appropriate to provide PV cells in every instance. It has to be a sort of bespoke situation, and I'm not aware of whether or not it'd be appropriate or not on this particular site. But as I say, in this instance, the use of air source heat pumps as an alternative has been proposed.
Could I suggest that we do both, Madam Chairman? And if so, I'll do that in the summing up and make a suggestion. But I think by this time, a huge building in Bracknell, we should have solar cells on the roof, period, actually. But I'll go on to the next question, if I may. I'm concerned about the grey cladding, actually, and the greyness of it, which looks a little bland, particularly in our weather. I just wonder if we could have a comment on that, because it is a building that we come into Bracknell and we see all the time, and I wouldn't want it to feel that it's resembling Eastern Europe.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Virgo had raised this issue with me previously. I mean, certainly there is, the building is designed with good variation and detailing in terms of materials in order to break up its bulk and massing. But as I responded to him at the time, the condition proposed on the agenda actually requires the submission of materials, and therefore if the committee as a whole was minded to look at different type of materials, then that's something that we could do under the terms of the commission of the condition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you
Madam
have
Chair, I'm
another-
grateful for that, and I'd like that to come back to the committee if that's possible, and it's agreed.
Thank you.
Could I also ask now, moving, and while we've just moved from the cladding, it concerns me greatly, excuse me, that the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue does not have a veto on cladding, and we all know what cladding can do in London. And I find that really strange that our conditions don't include the fact that the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue should have the final say.
Through you, Chair. Yes, the Berkshire Fire and Rescue, as you will see from the agenda, were consulted and made very clear that they are not a statutory consultee, unlike the Health and Safety Executive. The Health and Safety Executive are content with the design of this building in this instance from a planning perspective, and the Berkshire Fire and Rescue made very clear that it comes down to building regulations, and that was in the detailed nature of the cladding would be approved under there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, going on, I find that really strange, to be honest. Okay, moving to drainage. I know we've had a long chat about this, Joe, but I'm really concerned that we should not put land drainage into a sewer. It just seems absolutely nonsense to me when we know that that problem will just digress to the plant. There must be another way of doing proper land drainage, even if it meant putting in a proper infrastructure with pumping to get around the electrical problem. I understand that's a problem, but It just does not seem right to me. I'm just put that to the officer.
Through you, Chair. Yes, I'm grateful to Councillor Virgo for flagging up his concern on this point before the meeting, because it's allowed me to have a conversation with the LLFA, the drainage officer, and perhaps if I could explain very briefly to the committee. So what is proposed in terms of surface water drainage is that it should ultimately drain into Thames Water Sewer, and Thames Water have confirmed that this is acceptable to them. The reason that that an alternative solution isn't possible is because although there's a ditch along the northern boundary of the site, there's an electricity cable easement which is between 1 and 2 metres deep in front of it, and therefore, and my colleague has actually sort of provided me with a few details which I don't know if it would be helpful to read out.
Yes, please. I think
Because it's fairly technical, but so she has confirmed that this is her assessment as why discharge into the ditch is not feasible. So she says the depth of the proposed attenuation basin is 1.3 metres with an invert level of 63.7 metres. To discharge directly from the basin into the ditch, crossing existing electrical cables, assuming that a pipe from the basin into the ditch of the downs... this is really technical. I'm not sure if this is actually going to be very helpful. But basically, she's concerned that there'd be a clash between the cables and the pipe for direct connection into the ditch. A pipe cannot be constructed under the deepest cable, which would be 2 metres deep, as the ditch is much shallower than that. And a pipe cannot be constructed above the shallowest cable, as the depth of the attenuation basin will not allow gravity connection while providing for the storage required, and pumping would therefore be provided. And so she indicates that we've accepted the conclusions of the applicant's drainage report that direct gravity connection cannot be achieved into the ditch, and given that Thames Water are content to allow the surface water to be sent to the sewer, which ultimately does drain into a ditch itself, there's considerably no objection to the scheme on that ground. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's most puzzling living in this country sometimes.
Yeah.
Could we not, Joe, put tanks to... The point that I'm trying to make is if you put all this land drainage into a sewer and you build a new sewer, that's fine to a point, but it's going to join to another sewer, and that rush of water is the very thing that Thames Water say is the problem, that we then put sewage into our watercourses. And here we have one of the biggest buildings in Bracknell, and we're just putting it into the sewer.
Through you, Chair. I think actually that's not quite correct. I mean, the information I've got is that the Thames Water sewer into which the discharge is proposed connects into the ditch located along the site's northern boundary, which is the same ditch for direct discharge were it to be feasible.
So are we saying this?
It's the same thing, though, isn't it? It's still going into the public sewer, isn't it?
Well, it's going into the public sewer, but the public sewer, because it's a surface water sewer, not a foul water sewer, so the surface water sewer drains into the ditch.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that point, but it ends up in the public sewer. We don't have a separate system in this country for land drainage. That's my point. And when it's on such a big building and such a big area, we are just asking for trouble, frankly.
Through you, Chair, all I can do is confirm that this is a scheme that has been submitted and discussed with the LFA, who've confirmed that technically it is appropriate, and Thames Water's consent to the arrangement has been sought and has been given.
Chair, I'm happy with the answer, but I'd like to sum up and give a different view. Just a couple of other questions. Is the bike lane we're actually constructing, does that go all the way through to the town centre, please?
Through you, Chair. So the intention is that the bike lane will obviously link to the bridge over the A329, and as mentioned, that requires third-party agreement, so that won't happen instantly, although it actually will be possible to still get through in an informal arrangement. However, the works that are proposed as part of this development will include improvements at the junction to Webster Close to link through to the cycle lanes within Jennetts Park.
Could I have a supplementary on that too, please? Does that mean when people are actually in the building and installed, that the bike lane will then be completed for them to bike from that building into our town centre?
They'll be able to access the existing cycle arrangements that lead from Jennetts Park. I can't confirm if that is itself complete. My understanding is it was, but I couldn't tell you the exact route. But certainly it provides full access to all future residents and will ultimately provide a benefit for residents in Jennetts Park, because ultimately they'll be able to access the other side of the A329 over the pedestrian bridge.
You'll be pleased, that's all the questions I got, Chair.
Councillor Eggleston.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'm concerned about the daylight and sunlight assessment. On a new build, to have 3 of the windows where there's not enough natural daylight. I don't really understand how a design could allow that to happen. Apart from the fact people are going to be living in twilight in some of the rooms, it's not going to be, obviously, as explained, people are going to know about it. But if you don't have natural daylight, it's bad on people's mental health. People are using electricity when they wouldn't normally be. Is there no way that can be re-looked at?
I think there has been an assessment that shows that it is okay. Would you like to elucidate?
Yes, through you, Chair. You're correct that there are 3 windows that don't, or 3 rooms within Building 1 that don't meet the full guidelines. However, as sort of set out in the supplementary report, this is because of the depth of the rooms and because they provide living kitchen diners, and so they're very, very deep. And so the report confirms that the level of light to the living area of the room is adequate and meets the BRE guidelines, but it's just because of the depth of the room to the back element of the room, it doesn't meet the full guidance. However, that wouldn't be considered because the rear of the rooms are being used as kitchens, and because of the nature of that use, it's not considered that it would be possible to warrant refusal of the whole scheme on the basis of 3 rooms failing to meet the full guidelines.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Collins.
I've noted that Thames Water have accepted there's insufficient capacity in the foul water sewage infrastructure, and there's a condition to prevent occupation until that work is done. It might not be a planning consideration, but has Thames Water indicated when this work is likely to take place? Because I'm concerned if it's not fairly quickly after, or if planning application is permitted, that it will impact our 5-year land supply.
Through you, Chair. Yes, Thames Water have an obligation to provide the upgrades, but from experience of other sites, they are unlikely to start the modelling works and the design of those upgrade works until a planning permission has been granted. And as a result, I don't have direct information in terms of the time frame, but you're quite correct in thinking that obviously it does have a potential implication in terms of the delivery.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's all the questions. Do we have any hands up? No, I'm fine. Okay, I would like to move the motion at the recommendation, page 95 in the report. Is that seconded, please? Councillor Collins.
I'll second.
Thank you. So, comments and discussion, councillors, please. Councillor Virgo?
Well, where do you start here? Look, I think what you've done, the officers have done, is a good job. So I'm not in any way criticising that, because I know it's a really difficult thing to get a building like this up and running, and, you know, certainly by a highway. So please, you know, let's just say thank you for what you've done so far. But there are many things here I think are still unanswered. I think Sheila just asked the thing about the sewage. It is unacceptable that the sewage arrangements are not complete if people are in habitation. Not acceptable. We've got to the point in this country where, you know, if the authorities and Thames Water can't say anything, then the local authority has to take over. So I would say that that is not acceptable, and we need in this committee to know the dates and the times that that infrastructure will be built, and no habitation should take place until it's completed. That's the first thing I would recommend. The land drainage, I still think, is a huge problem, and I'm very unhappy about it because I don't think, you know, having read so much about land drainage and the problems in the sewage works, it is absolutely nonsense that we now consider putting one of our biggest buildings and all the land drainage in the sewer. It's just crazy. There must be another way of doing this. I'm not an expert, I'm not an engineer, but there must be. And I would suggest that they go back and reconsider this and find another solution. We don't have to, you know, it might mean digging out new ditches, it might mean all kinds of things, but we should not be doing this in 2024, that's for sure. I'm also concerned about some of the bike works. I mean, if people live there and we expect them to, as we have in this country, in this council, I should say, we're trying to get climate change in an advanced state. They should be able to cycle from the flats into the town centre. And that infrastructure should be completed. And I'm old enough to know that many years ago, when we built housing estates, we built the infrastructure first and the houses second. But that doesn't seem to happen these days. The cladding worries me a lot, and I would be, and I'm grateful to the officer to say, can we have a look at that and make sure that that's acceptable. I do find it extremely strange that the fire authority is not in charge of this. When we looked at London and looked at that disaster, that should not be left in the building regs. It should be the fire authority. They are the proper people in this country that will say yes or no. And lastly, we haven't talked about the traffic, but there will be a lot of traffic on that roundabout, and I think all the suggestion from the officers is that they will restyle the phasing of the traffic lights. Well, I'm not so sure that will be a total solution in rush hour, but I look to highways and see what they would say, but I think that might well be a huge congestion at times. I'm not so sure I can support this, Madam Chairman, in this particular time until some of these questions are answered for me. Obviously, the rest of the committee will make their own mind up, but I think there's too many questions left here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Virgo. Anybody else would like to state what they think? Speak? No? In that case, I'll say a few words. I believe that the LLSA has had a really good look at it and a further look. And I believe that what is possible in this situation has been done. But I agree that we do need to know that surface water drainage system is going to be there probably before the building is started, and certainly before they do anything that could complicate matters. But yeah, I think that's in hand. Bike lanes. We generally build lanes as far as we can, as they're doing their best to link up with the pathway over the main road there. And that path links up, and so do the bike lanes in Jennett's Park lead to others. If there are any breaks further to those in those paths and cycleways, then we should be looking at that. In fact, we could have a review of that at some time, couldn't we? Go on a bike ride, everybody. So I think that's as good as it can get at the moment, and I'm grateful that the S106 has been secured to do that link up to the park, to the bridge over the road. The fire authority, I'm sure, would make their concerns felt if they thought that we should do something somewhere or other. Certainly in building regs, they have to get that right. So I think that's adequately covered too. And the traffic on the roundabout, there's been extensive study on that. So for the moment, I believe that's okay too. So unless anyone wants to speak further, then may I say all those in favour, please?
That's 3 in favour.
Thank you. Those against? And those abstaining? Thank you. I think that's carried. Thank you very much. Item 7, the Don Benny. Is it Don Benny next? Don Benny Restaurant. Right. I didn't think we'd have lots of people in for that, but they would, of course. Thank you. The officer's report, please.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal before the committee tonight is for the erection of one 4-bedroom dwelling house, including off-street car parking, following the demolition of outbuildings and reconfiguration of the car park serving the restaurant to the rear of the Don Benny in Winkfield Row. Attention is drawn to the supplementary report, which contains one change to condition 14. The application is a resubmission of application 1900857 FUL, which was approved by the planning inspector at appeal. However, the development has not been implemented within the required timeframe, and so is before you tonight. I draw your attention to the plans. So here is the location plan showing the location of the site. This is the existing Don Benny restaurant with car parking and its outbuildings. This is the proposed block plan showing the erection of the dwelling in this location here. Here is the restaurant with the seating area to the front. This is part of the existing outbuilding, which will be retained and remodelled for 3 off-street car parking spaces serving the 4-bedroom dwelling with turning space so that vehicles can exit onto Chavey Down Road in a forward gear. And then this shows the layout of the car park, providing 21 spaces, including a designated car park disabled space close to the restaurant entrance. Bin storage is located here for the restaurant, and bin storage for the dwelling is located here with easy access to curbside. These are elevations of the dwelling. I'll zoom in so we can see them clearly. Simple frontage, the rear elevations and side, and then with the floor plans showing the 3 bedrooms and bathrooms, and here we can see the layout of the dwelling plot in a bit more detail, the bin storage here, and bike storage that meets the SPD for parking. This is existing and proposed street scene, showing the dwelling is no higher than the existing Don Benny restaurant. And onto the site photos. So this is looking towards Chavy Down Road. And the dwelling would go in this area. Here we can see that the existing car park is gravelled and there's no parking bays laid out or marked. Again, this is taken from the entrance to the car park, which will not change. This is looking down Chavy Down Road. So this, the white building on the left-hand side is the Don Benny restaurant, with the nearest residential properties across Chavy Down Road. And here is looking into the site where the access will be provided. You have this outbuilding which will be remodelled to provide a carport for the 3 off-street car parking spaces. So the majority of the objections received cite the loss of the car park into the restaurant in an area which suffers from on-street car parking already. The current car park serving Don Benny, as we've seen from the photos, is a gravel-based, unmarked, and has no condition requiring it to be retained as parking. Photographic evidence submitted at the time of the 2019 appeals shows that the current car park can accommodate a maximum of 22 cars, which was accepted at the time by the inspector. In considering the appeal, the inspector stated, "The existing car park has no formal demarcation of spaces. Consequently, visitors will park in an arrangement according to their own behaviours, whereby alignment and distancing are likely to be variable. They may well be inclined to park away from other vehicles to allow themselves more room to exit their vehicle, or may park inefficiently due to being in a rush or preoccupied. Such poor parking could happen on any or all of the 3 sides of the car park. Consequently, there will be times when poor parking prevents the 22 space capacity and could even be several spaces adrift. The proposal includes the parking, formalisation and demarcation of the parking spaces. This would dictate the parking spacing, alignment and arrangement, thereby ensuring that all the 21 spaces are available. Accordingly, this would at least counterbalance the loss of the 1 car parking space. The inspector therefore found that the parking provision would be adequate and as such concluded that the proposal would not harm highway safety. Since this decision, there's been no change to the parking standards SPD, and whilst there is a new local plan, the requirement regarding highway safety remains the same. Therefore, there are no material considerations or additional evidence which would alter the consideration of this application. In consideration of other matters, there are no objections from the conservation consultant, considered under paragraphs 9.5 to 9.16 of the report, or biodiversity officer, and the application is considered acceptable in terms of overlooking and amenities of both existing and future occupiers. Again, this is contained within the report at 9.21 to 9.26. Therefore, the application is before the Planning Committee to be delegated to the Assistant Director Planning to be approved following the satisfactory conclusion of a Section 106 securing SPA mitigation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Questions for the officer, please? Councillor Collins.
I was a little disappointed to see there were no proposals regarding making the building low carbon, but so there are no solar panels or heat pumps mentioned. However, I'm led to believe that this will be covered by building regulations. Is that correct?
If I may, through you, Chair. Yes, I had a conversation yesterday with the agent who confirmed that to comply with building regulations, they would in all likelihood have to either put PV solar panels on the building or supply an air source heat pump. And they do take a fabric first, so making sure that the building is efficiently insulated as possible in the first instance to ensure that it doesn't use as much, or it uses as little energy as possible once it's built and occupied.
Thank you. Councillor Virgo.
Could I just ask, Chair, did I make this up, or did I see that we were waiting for a 10% biodiversity before we agree this, Sarah? Or did I?
If I may, through you, Chair, the application was submitted before the 10% biodiversity became mandatory. That came in earlier this year, and the application actually came in before that. And therefore it doesn't have to. There is a condition asking for biodiversity improvements on there.
Thanks.
Yep. Any other, excuse me, any other questions? No? Councillor Hayes, sorry.
It's just an observation on highways. There's at this point in time a letter going to neighbours around there because of a new design element for humps and slowing down of surrounding that area. Does that have any consequences with this application? It's just something that's just been happening, but did highways take that into consideration?
Thanks.
Through you, Chair, I can't answer, as there's no highway officer here tonight, whether or not they took it into account. However, there is sufficient on-site parking to accommodate the dwelling, and there is commensurate an equal amount of on-site parking provided for the restaurant as is existing. So there shouldn't be any impact from this proposal on the surrounding streets than there is already.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So it falls to me to move that this application is approved, and the recommendation is on page 124 of the agenda pack and amended on page 4 of the supplementary papers. Is that seconded, please? Councillor Collins.
I'll second that.
Thank you. So, comments, please. Councillor Virgo?
Very briefly, residents are dead against this, Chair, and I can understand why. Because to cut a car park down on spaces in this day and age is clearly strange. And of course, I live very close to it, but not that close that I should declare anything. But I would also say that a lot of people use the car park with vans and with pickups, and those are quite big vehicles, and therefore if you park those in, other cars can't park and so on. So it's not satisfactory at all, but of course it was agreed appeal, so there's very little we can do about it. But I think it's regrettable because a lot of the terraces in Wingfield Road do not have anywhere to park their cars, and there is very limited car park space. And if there is a lot of rebuilding going on in, building inside the old houses, and if you get 2 or 3 lorries there, as you can imagine, the pressure on that on those spaces is fantastic. So I can't support this, but I can understand members will have to support it because of the appeal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. As Councillor Virgo says, it was one on appeal before, and nothing else has changed. So let's put it to the vote. All those in favour?
5 in favour.
Those against?
1 against.
And abstention. Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving swiftly on to item 8, 15 Darwell Drive. Sorry, page what? I've forgotten. it's page 131 of the report. And yes, with the supplementary report on page, 4, of course. The officer too. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, my name is Benjamin Marshall and I'll be the presenting officer for this case. The proposed development is a Section 73 application for the variation Condition 2, amended plans, and 3, materials, for alterations to the front and side elevations of the approved dwelling. The application has been referred to the Planning Committee owing to the number of objections received from neighbouring properties. Concerns have been raised regarding loss of privacy, overlooking, increase in noise, and the creation of precedents. An objection has also been received from the Parish Council focusing on the removal of a glazed side-facing window. Next slide. The previous application... Apologies. The previous application involved the construction of a part single-storey, part two-storey rear extension, raising of the ridge height, with the approved plans displayed on the screen now. At the point of submission, the application currently under consideration included amendments to the first floor side window to allow for the window to be clear glazed and openable. During the application process, this was omitted from the proposal due to it being contrary to the parent permission. Next slide. Following the amendments, the only remaining changes which are to be considered are the change in materials to the front gable elevation and the enlargement of a ground floor window adjacent to the entrance door shown on the screen. It is important to note that the principal development cannot be revisited as part of this application, and only the material considerations are the impact of the changes on the character of the dwelling and the surrounding area, and the impact on the amenity of occupiers of the neighbouring dwellings. Next slide. Sorry. The current slide details both the original approved site elevation plan on the top and the currently proposed elevation on the bottom. As you can see, the only change is the enlargement of a approved ground floor window. This alteration is not considered to have a detrimental impact on the established character of the street scene and would be a minor change viewed from the street scene. It is also unlikely that the enlargement of this window would have any greater impact on the amenity of the occupier of the adjacent property. Next slide. Similar to the previous slide, the current slide details both the original approved front elevation on the top and the proposed below. The original approval included hanging tile across the front gable, which would be found to be in keeping with the street scene. The proposed material includes a vertical brick feature to either side of the gable, with the main gable being finished in a white render. Both the render and the brick detailing are found present within the street scene, and as such is not considered that the proposed material will be out of keeping with the established character. This slide here were photos taken from today, which supports the officer conclusion that the established character includes first floor render and brick detailing. To conclude, the amended proposal represents appropriate additions to the property and would not result in an adverse impact on the character of the existing dwelling, surrounding area, nor the residential amenity of occupiers of neighbouring properties. The proposal is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in section 11 of the committee report and the amendments set out on page 4 of the supplementary report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the officer, please? I think this is quite straightforward. Oh, Councillor Virgo.
Sorry, I keep on tonight. Can I just have confirmation, Ben, that the overlooking Winkfield Parish Council made this point is acceptable?
Through you, Chair. So, originally the first floor side window, which I will highlight on the screen here, was proposed to be non-obscure glazed and openable, which was contrary to one of the conditions on the original consent, which found that the perceived overlooking would be harmful if these conditions were not attached to the consent. So we refused to allow that under this consent, so that's not a consideration anymore. They're retaining it being obscure glazed and non-openable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other points of clarification or anything? Councillor Hayes.
Just following on from there, can we, when we say it's, that it's going to be retained as glazed and non-opening, how will this be not enforced but kept that they don't, that it is? Is that done via building regs or hopefully then a neighbour noticing or something, just for security?
Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So the conditions from the original consent, excluding the ones which have been amended under this application, have been carried over. So the condition requires that it's obscure glaze in line with Pilkington 11.3 and is fixed shut. Anything in terms of fire safety will be dealt with under building regs. However, from the point of the planning consent and what we are able to consider, that element is no longer part of this application as it has been removed. So the only elements under consideration are the impact of the ground floor side window and the changing materials. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's nice and clear. So the recommendation is on, as amended by the supplementary report, is on page 135 of the report, and the supplementary addition is on page 4. I propose that that should be accepted. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Thompson. I have to think. Anybody like to comment? No? So all those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Good. Moving swiftly on to item 8, the land at the junction of Wood Lane and Forest Road. And this is, Margaret, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members asked to note a supplementary planning report has been prepared, which contains additional informatives and amendments to the report. Since this report was prepared, an additional amendment has been made to condition 16 to allow 4 years rather than 3 years before a further Great Crested Newt survey is carried out if required. This is a full application for the erection of 38 dwellings, including 35% affordable homes, open space, SUDS features, landscaping, biodiversity enhancements, and a new vehicular access off Forest Road. The site is allocated housing in the local plan under policy LP11, which is also known as BIN 5. The application was originally submitted for 40 dwellings, and this is now being amended to 38 dwellings to improve the layout. And the application is being considered by the Planning Committee because more than 5 objections have been received. The plan on the screen shows the land edged in red with Forest Road to the north of the site, with single-storey bungalows directly opposite, and Cheney Close to the west, which is marked mainly by 2-storey dwellings. To the eastern boundary of the site is a footpath that leads to the King's Academy School, and to the southern boundary is the golf course associated with the Golf Entertainment Centre. The proposed layout shows access from Forest Road, with houses in a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedrooms. Of these dwellings, only affordable housing units to be provided, 5 are proposed to be for social rent, 4 for affordable rent and 4 for shared ownership. And a suds pond and open space is provided to the eastern and southern boundaries. Private gardens are provided for each dwelling and soft landscaping is incorporated throughout the scheme. Parking is provided to standard, with each dwelling having 2 or 3 parking spaces, depending on the size of the units, and parking is provided on driveways and to the front of dwellings. And 8 visitor parking spaces have been provided around the site, which is the standard, which is generally 1 visitor parking space for every 5 properties. And a cycle path and pedestrian access will be provided to the site, which will link into Wood Lane, and that will give access to the King's Academy School, to the Sang, and to the new community hub, including GP surgeries. Existing residents are located to the west of the site. The proposed dwellings have been sited at a suitable distance from the backs of these dwellings, with the sides of the proposed dwellings facing the properties in Cheney Close, which have first floor windows. These are shown as bathroom windows only, to be obscure glazed and fixed with only a top opening fan light. And show the trees on the site. And the plan shows that there are 4 tree preservation order trees, which are along Forest Road to the north. 2 of these trees are considered to be veteran trees, and these are to be retained as part of the development. All the trees are proposed to be protected in line with advice from Natural England and do have sufficient space to grow safely. I'll show you the marking of the affordable housing units. The pink dwellings here show the social rent units. The blue are the shared ownership, and the green are affordable rent. As you can see, they are distributed evenly throughout the scheme. One of the units is provided as a wheelchair accessible unit, and that's the bungalow which is shown. The pink unit here in the southeast. Affordable housing has been provided in full accordance with policy LP11 and LP16 of the local plan. I'll show you some housing elevations. Generally the houses are 2-storey, apart from the one bungalow in the scheme. The top street scene shows the houses facing Forest Road, which they all have a traditional scheme of red brick and render. Street scene in the middle, BB, shows the housing which faces the rear of the site and the golf course at the Blue Mountain. And the bottom street scene shows the housing which is proposed to front the open space and the suds pointing to the east. A climate change assessment has been provided in compliance with policy LP27, and the requirements of sustainable construction will be secured by conditions, and that includes conditions related to water usage and for an energy statement to be approved. In terms of biodiversity, the site retains important hedgerows around the site, which is where the main ecological interest has been identified. These will be protected and increased by 21% under biodiversity net gain, which will be secured through conditions. While the proposal provides this 21% increase in hedgerows, there is a loss in habitat across the site, which is currently a field. The site has retained the most ecologically important habitats on the site, but the site also includes open space and a mix of habitat, including grassland. It is considered sufficient efforts have been made to secure this on site, but in this instance, as the scheme was submitted before mandatory BNG came into force, as this came in last year, the application also includes a requirement for off-site solutions which have been secured through the 106 agreement. The application is acceptable to the Highway Authority, subject to conditions and a Section 106 agreement. Also, drainage issues have been considered and accepted on site, and the 106 will also include measures for the Thames Basin Heath protection area. I'll show the site some material that came in through the developers and then photos. This is part of the material submitted, which shows the corner, the footpath link around the site and those sub-features. And also another view of the property with the open space to the east. And some examples of the elevation. As members will see, the fairly traditional red brick and tile roof properties. These are semi-detached properties. Again, the detached properties are red brick and some renders being used. And further detached properties. And a picture of the proposed bungalow. And here, this is a photo of Wood Lane, which runs to the east of the site, and there will be a link into this to secure access to local facilities. And examples of some of the properties in the area across the site, across Forest Road. And again here, the properties across the road in Forest Road also include some bungalows. There's a photograph of the entrance to the site. So there is an existing access which has been used for the construction of the Golfplex complex in the past. It will be widened and improved as part of the application. Again, these are properties in Cheney Close, just to show the typical design and character of properties in the area. And this property here, Hartwood, is adjacent to plot 1 on the site. And if we see, as members are aware when we visited on site, this property has been extended from a bungalow to a 2-storey property. And currently the boundary there is rather open because the building works are taking place. And members will note informative in the supplementary report seeking as part of the landscape plan that more planting is achieved along this boundary to ensure the privacy of the users of plot 1 in the garden, as there are windows along that side boundary. And this is a photo of the very lovely veteran trees which are being retained on the site, and the feature there on Forest Road, and another photograph of the veteran trees. And again. And some views taken looking into the site from the adjacent properties in Cheney Close, where obviously the site currently is an open field. The recommendation is set out page 36 of the report under section 11 with the following to be secured through planning obligations: measure to mitigate the impact on the Thames Basin Heath SPA, implementation of the Landscape Environmental Management Plan to deliver management of the on-site biodiversity net gain, a biodiversity net gain monitoring sum, a contribution to off-site habitat creation, SUDS features and management, affordable housing, securing passive open space which is secured within the site, and contribution towards community facilities and highway mitigation works. And there are also requirements to enter into highway agreements under section 278 and section 38 for the connections to Wood Lane and adoption of routes within the site. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the recommendations within the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Questions for the officer, please? Any? Councillor Collins first, please.
Am I correct that gas boilers are being installed as part of this development? And am I correct that, again, that's the same issue as with Don Benny and building regulations?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. It is correct that the energy report that has been submitted does refer to the use of gas boilers, and yes, it is something that is picked up through building regulations. The energy report does discuss various options for the site, including PV panels, which will be secured through the condition. But yes, gas boilers are intended.
Supplementary, no. Councillor Virgo, please.
Could I ask, through you, Chair, Margaret, about the flood risk, which seems to be there, as you put on the report. And I think in 9.53, hydraulic simulation results have been submitted. Could you explain all this a little bit? There is a flood risk there. I find it a bit baffling to understand why the SUDS officer says that building all these houses won't make any difference or something. I find that strange. I just wondered if we could just open that up a bit.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Through you. Yeah, there is a section on drainage and flooding within the report. It was noted when the site was allocated, the southeast corner was excluded from the developable area because of the risks of flooding. And obviously a SUDS feature is provided and works along the southern boundary that will reduce any likelihood of flooding. In addition to that, 2 of the units on the southeast corner are shown that the floor levels will be submitted to ensure that the floor levels are above the predicted worst case flooding which could happen in the future. The LLFA have looked at the application and they are happy with those measures, that there's no risk of flooding to the properties, and the mitigation works in the features and ditches will improve the situation on the site.
Thank you very much.
Could I ask a further question?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Am I right in saying that in this application that the land drainage will go into the sewer?
My understanding is that Thames Water have been consulted and have no concern about the impact of any drainage into the sewer. I wouldn't like to comment, I'm afraid, on that, as I don't know the finer details, but I know that the LLFA have looked at it and are satisfied with the conclusions, and Thames Water had no concerns with this in terms of sewage capacity.
Could I ask, Margaret, whether we've had a letter from Thames Water saying that, or whether they just haven't commented?
We have had a letter from them confirming that, and you note on the report that there were informatives from Thames Water.
Right.
Yeah, that supplementary report has a full comment about it. Any other questions, please? No? Then I would like to move that we approve this application. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Collins.
I second that.
Thank you. Discussions. Who would like to speak? Anyone? Councillor Virgo.
Seems to be me tonight, Chair, I'm afraid. I still find this extraordinary that Thames Water have allowed a new estate to put all this land water in the sewer. It is just extraordinary. I don't know what to say, Chair, anymore. I think they're absolutely an idiotic organisation. We shouldn't be doing this, Chair. We should have learnt the lesson by now, and we should have told developers that there should be a separate land drainage arrangement. And I'm really surprised the SUDS officer has not said this. We can't go on in this room building loads and loads of houses and pouring all the land drainage into the sewer. Crazy, crazy. I can't really support this, I don't think, on this level. I feel very strongly about this, Chair. If we don't get this right and this committee doesn't stand up for this, we won't get anywhere. But we've got to have a better arrangement for people living around. There is also evidence that there is flooding in that area. And here we do. We just pour it down the sewer and hope. Crazy. So those are my views. I'm sorry, Chair, but that's how I feel. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak? Then I would like to... Councillor Collins.
I'd just like to make 2 points. I'd like to thank the officer for considering the relationship between Plot 1 and existing property Hartwood, which I did have concerns about, and I'm welcoming the informative, which advises of additional screening between the two of them. I also welcome the recognition that Blue Mountain Sang is in poor condition, which it is, and I have had complaints about it from residents, and I see that it will be rectified as part of the S106 agreement, so thank you again.
Thank you. Anyone else to comment? Do we have anyone online commenting? I don't think we do. No. So I think I have grave concerns about the groundwater being put in the sewer, but I think that we have to sort out what we are going to put in our policies and our guidance notes in this respect to try and eliminate this sort of thing from happening. But I don't see that we can at the moment because we don't have that sort of detail. And there appear to be very good reasons why this should go ahead. We're not the experts. We have to rely on the experts that we have. So on that, I would like to ask that you, those in favour should show, please. Thank you. Any against? And any abstentions, please? Thank you. Item 10. Page 171. The Admiral Cunningham. Officer report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Will Rendell and I will be presenting this application this evening. The application is for a full planning permission for retention of 3 stretched tents within the garden of the Admiral Cunningham Public House, which is located within Priestwood. I would like to draw members' attention to the fact that tents are now lawful, having been erected in July 2020, therefore over 4 years ago. Members will observe from the site plan here the location of the public house with the tents within the garden area, as you can see here. On the next slide here, members will also note the elevation plans of the tents, which are significantly lower than the main building of the public house. Members will observe from aerial imagery that in the past there has been a marquee in the garden space, which is shown in the image here on the left from 2017, and the image on the right is the existing tents from 2021. Therefore, the use of a tent on the site to provide covered seating has already been established. The next photo is of the tents from a site visit that was carried out by the case officer. As mentioned, as the tents are now lawful, the focus of the application is securing appropriate noise mitigation. Initially, Environmental Health objected to the application on the basis that no noise mitigation plan had been submitted and recommended that such information needed to be submitted. The applicant has now submitted a noise assessment and a noise management plan. The noise management plan includes mitigation measures such as grouping events into 3 different colour-coded categories based on their levels of noise: green, amber or red. Each of these events will have different levels of volume, with red being the highest, and appropriate mitigation to manage the volume of each of these events. For example, red events would have a frequency of up to 3 per year and will be held in autumn or winter months when residents are most likely to have their windows closed. Additionally, in the case of such events, at least 1 month's notice will be given to residents prior to that event being held. The plan also includes noise monitoring during events, as well as a noise limiter, which will set the maximum level of volume during each of the 3 colour-coded events. The Council's Environmental Health Officer has stated that the noise limiters have been fixed by a sound engineer and as such cannot be increased above that level on site. However, the correct selection of each level of noise limitation by the sound limiter would be by the management of the site. Environmental Health have stated that any mismanagement of the noise limitation will be investigated by Environmental Health. As a result of submission of the noise management plan, the Council's Environmental Health Officer has withdrawn their objection and stated that the proposals in the noise management plan strike an acceptable balance between the needs of business to be successful and the rights of neighbouring residents to enjoy their properties. Environmental Health have confirmed that the noise management plan that has been submitted was implemented in May 2024, including the noise limitation, and since this time they have received no complaints regarding the levels of the noise on site. To this end, Condition 1 recommends that a noise management plan received by local power authority must be adhered to at all times. In conclusion, it is considered the impact of the tents is acceptable subject to the recommended noise mitigation condition and is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I actually asked for this to come to committee because I was very unhappy with the tents, but they are now legal. only insofar as it enables seating for more than 400 people in the garden. And it, as you could see from the photos, that the houses are very close by. And so I find this really very difficult. Can I ask for questions of the officer, please? Councillor Zaharuddin, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Are there any stats to indicate increasing trend in the antisocial behavior of patrons of this pub around the close proximity of these premises? As this is one of the objections that I can see in the application. So.
Through you, Chair. So regarding antisocial behaviour, that's something that we're unable to really consider in this application, as this is a separate matter from planning and will be dealt by appropriate authorities in that case.
Thank you. Other questions? I have one. Did you have one? Do you want to go? Yeah, Councillor Collins.
What action can be taken if the applicant doesn't adhere to the noise management plan?
Through you, Chair, I will refer to the Council's Environment Health Officer regarding their enforcement actions that they can take.
Thank you.
I have a question, Chair. Councillor Nahid.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'll come to you, but the environmental officer.
It's okay, thank you. Through you, Chair. The the powers that we have, obviously outside planning and enforcement, would be twofold. Firstly, under the Environment Protection Act regarding statutory nuisance from noise, and secondly, public nuisance as a responsible authority under the Licensing Act for the premise licence of the premise. So there's a number of things that we can do.
Yes,
Thank you.
please.
Through you, Chair, if I could just add, obviously we do have enforcement powers under the planning legislation as well, and the failure to comply with the terms of the condition could lead to a breach of condition notice being served.
Thank you, that's very helpful. I have a question for the officer. It says in the report that, oh no, it's in the noise report from the contractor who assessed it. It says that the patron noise has not been formally assessed in the report. However, well, perhaps you could explain what will happen if you've got 400 people shouting on top of the new music level that is allowed. Is that going to be a problem?
Through you, Chair. So one thing I would note is that in the past, the site has had a marquee in the past and has been used for events in the past of some of larger scale. I would also refer to the Council Environment Health Officer for further guidance on patron noise.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So one of the items in the noise management plan regarding mitigation talks about quite specifically the management of the patrons and what the premise management will be undertaking. So that would be to increase the signage for patrons, to actively manage any antisocial behaviour on site and in the vicinity of the site, and ensuring all that staff are fully trained in the awareness of the noise management policy and procedures that need to be in place. And as was explained in the previous question, that should we receive further complaints regarding noise, whether it be for music and or patrons, that's something that we would investigate.
Thank you. Any other? Oh, Nahid, Councillor Ijaz, please.
Thank you, Chair. It is mentioned that these tents are mostly going to be used during autumn time. when most residents are indoor. But we know that that is not, in reality, that doesn't happen. They're more popular when it's sunny and it's hot and people like to sit out in the open air like they're doing nowadays. If you go there in these days, you will see that people are sitting there mostly outside, not inside building. So that really doesn't add up. Thank you.
Could you comment, please?
For you, Chair. So as the noise management plan states, the events that are generally quieter, the green and amber events, are proposed to be held in the summer and spring months of the year more generally, when those red events will be held in the winter months. Would the Council Environmental Health Officer also provide further guidance on this?
Yes, of course, through you, Chair. So as has already been explained, the different categories of events, and it has been made quite clear that the red events which would be louder would be taking place in the autumn and winter. They will be limited quite specifically in two forms. Firstly, the number of events, and secondly, the noise levels, which is set through the very strict limiter that has been installed on the premises since May. The other events, being amber and green, obviously have an increase in number, but again, they are limited for amber as to when they will be and the type of music and where the event will take place.
Thank you. Councillor Ijaz, have you got a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, the tents are being used as we speak now. It's not just, just to do with the main events or organized events. So customers are using it as we go there every day. So this, the noise level relating to organized event, 3 events a year, it really is not the case here, is it?
Could you comment?
For you, Chair. Well, I think one thing I would sort of comment on is, as it is an existing public house garden that has had these structures in there since at least 2017, that noise of patrons and events would have been taking place for some time. I'd also point to the fact that they tend to also already lawful. So I think I'd also refer to the Council Environment Health Officer if they have anything further to comment on in this area.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair. So the music that's outside is now only till 9 p.m. When there is music inside, that is restricted, and that is with doors and windows closed. Yes, it is a public house. People are sitting outside, but there's not always music. But when there is music, it is through the limiter, whether it is a red, amber or green event. The controls that have been put in place since May in particular are really quite strict, which have been put forward and implemented by the management of the public house.
Has there been any survey done in recent times to monitor the noise level and the discomfort of the people who live adjacent to this public house? Thank you.
Would you like me to answer that directly? So we have not received any formal complaints to Environmental Health since the noise limiter has been installed. But our intention would be that in future, should we receive complaints, we'll fully investigate, which will involve monitoring at residents' properties as to whether there is a statutory nuisance or not, and also to look at compliance with the noise management plan conditions.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got a terrible croak. Oh, Councillor Eggleston.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just wanted to know if the residents did feel that the noise conditions were being broken, how quickly did the Environmental Health Agency, how quickly would you actually be able to get onto it and get it sorted out, just so that they know they can be reassured with this condition?
Okay. Through you, Chair, our service standard is to respond within 2 working days of any complaint that we receive. to ensure that we've got the right information. We can follow up with the client as to the true nature of their complaint. So we would actually respond very quickly, and if it required us to do a site visit, to do some monitoring from the resident's property, or install noise monitoring equipment, that would be dependent quite specifically on staff resources. But our aim would be, for this particular case, because of it coming to committee this evening and the new noise management plan, we would endeavour to deal with it as soon as we possibly could.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jazz, do you have another question? No, I think she's okay. I have a question about how far and wide the consultation went, and where was the sound monitored to or checked? Because from the diagrams that I've seen, it doesn't appear that the properties on Windlesham Road have been checked, and there are a couple of complaints from there. I know that one resident says he has to turn his TV down, and this disturbs the enjoyment of his garden because it seems to reverberate somehow or other. You see, sound does funny things, doesn't it? Was that checked along Windlesham Road?
So I'll answer that directly through you, Chair. If you look quite specifically at the noise survey, the report identifies exactly where the noise monitoring, where the noise monitoring took place, and it did take place on all sides of the building, whether it be in Windmill Road, near Windlesham Road, Priestwood Court Road. So we were satisfied that the survey that was undertaken was relevant in all locations.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Thank you very much. I think we have a recommendation on page 180 that this is should be approved. Where am I? 180, there it is. I'm not sure. Is there a problem? No. No. Could someone else move this one, please? And I'll second, just for the purposes of debate.
Happy to move it, Chair.
Thank you. Could you second?
Oh, I'll second that.
Thank you very much. Would anyone like to speak on this, please? No? Then I'll have my say. I have for years been dealing with noise complaints from residents who live around the Admiral Cunningham, but those are not even, some of those are not even close to the Admiral Cunningham. I think that the limitations that have been made recently on the noise have improved matters, but because I haven't heard of people a mile away hearing the noise recently. So I'm hoping that has had a mitigating effect on what's happening. This has always been a community pub, and it's a wonderful resource. It's a lovely place to be, but it does allow 400 plus people in the garden. And if they're having an event with the noise raised, then people round the tables, 10 to a table, will have to raise their voices to be heard to one another across the table. And that's my concern, is that the patron usage of this on top of the the amplified sound is going to cause more trouble than is expected. And I think the only way that we're going to find that out is when we get an amber or red event to test it with, and we'll get hordes of people. Another point that I really am concerned about is the parking, which is horrendous around there. And when you get 400 people, I mean, if it was just 5 people per vehicle, you'd only get 80 vehicles, I think, wouldn't it be? And you're definitely not going to get 5 people per vehicle, even though I know the pub encourages people to car share. It's never going to be that neat and tidy. So I think now, if we pass this, we need to keep a check on the noise and be ready to contact environmental health if there is a problem, and do that promptly. We need to notify police promptly if there's an issue with antisocial behaviour, and I think if you've read the objections, you'll see that there have been some horrendous happenings locally. And we need to also to consider that there are disabled and elderly people living nearby. I know that the pub, again, is a fantastic community resource, looks after such people if they come to know about them. And so, and as a family business, I think it does extremely well. I would love to just pick it up and put it somewhere less populated, to be honest. But we are where we are. I think the next step, and I've talked to the landlord about this, is the transport situation, which is frankly unacceptable, with parks, cars parked on both sides of the road where there's a curve in the road and there's only room for one car to get through. That's frankly very dangerous, and I'm rather cross that there isn't a highways person here to answer questions about that. But we haven't got that. What we've got is in front of us, and I think this is a first step, but I think we need to make public aware that they can make changes if they do speak up about what's happening. There are ways. I know there's been fear of reprisals because this has happened in the past some time ago, I have to say, but I'm sure not from the business, but more from perhaps punters who are unhappy about being told they're too noisy. So there is a way to complain anonymously, and we need to use that if people feel really anxious about reporting. But we need to know the truth, and I'm sure the pub wants to know if there's an issue, and they will try to resolve it, because I've had that discussion with them, and they are quite definite that they want to work with the community. And so for my purposes, I think we have to accept this and go with it, but it's a first step. We need to up the dialogue with the pub, and also to talk to highways and find, I don't know, park and ride somewhere for the pub. But yeah, there are answers to all the problems, but we have to be speaking up if there is a problem. And I'm here as the local councillor who takes all that on board, and people know me. So if there's no other... Councillor Jazz, still got your hand up? Do you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. You have touched on the subject of parking, but it's not only just the parking that is a problem there. When you are arriving there, because of the not many off-road parking spaces, all the residents on the right-hand side They park all their cars, they're all queued up on one side, and there is no space to even if there are, and it's a two-way road. So if there are two cars coming from both directions, you can't go anywhere. You're stuck there. It has happened to me many times personally when I've gone to use the Priestwood Community Centre. So we have, I mean, now consider if there are 300 or 400 people coming, how the local or even the visitors are going to cope with this situation. I would request that we should actually physically, as councillors, monitor one of their big events and see how everything happens, and then pass this application, because otherwise we are, it is fine to say that people can complain and it will be picked up. We all know the process is quite laborious and lengthy and things get lost in the system. And we want to protect our residents there as well, as much as we want to protect the business, which obviously does serve local community. So these are my sort of concerns that I want to raise. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Before we take a vote, anyone else need to speak? No? Okay. Those in favour? Oh dear. 1, 2, 3. Those against? Naz. And those abstentions? That's passed. Thank you very much. Sorry, switch that back on. Moving on swiftly to agenda item 11. 265 Yorktown Road, College Town. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. My name's Kevin Lloyd-Jones. I'm the planning officer for this case. The application relates to a site to the north of Yorktown Road in College Town. It currently contains a 2-storey office block to the front and a single-storey warehouse to the rear. The site is within the defined settlement and is bounded by residential dwellings on 3 sides. Now, the site has a confirmed mixed class use, Class E office, and B8, which is storage and distribution. And that's been the case since at least 1998. Now, this particular application has been submitted by Inception Planning on behalf of Distributed Micro Technology Limited, who are a distributor of electrical components. The site only operates from 8:30 to 5:30 Monday to Friday and is closed at weekends. So just showing the existing and proposed site plan. So we're dealing here, it's for a proposed single-storey side extension just to the rear warehouse, so the red items at the back of the site there. It's to create additional commercial space, so office and storage, but only for the existing users of the site. The applicant has confirmed there will be no additional staff to the site as a result of this development. Now, it's been brought to committee following the receipt of 4 neighbour objections, so it's been through the 3 to 5 procedure. Since this was first submitted, I think it's back in November 2023, we've been through a number of amendments to the plans, and the ones before you today have been revised. So previously, the side extension, the single-storey side extension, had a gable side to it, the eastern side. That's now dual-hipped and raked back, so following the pitch of the existing. The existing and proposed parking spaces have been removed. I'll show you in the next slide, but currently cars are parked to the front of the site on the bend in the road, the inside of Yorktown Road, which is an ancient highway and cannot be parked upon, and it's creating a sight line. So what has happened now, a total of 11 parking spaces, which is within our SPD, have been shown within the site, including manoeuvring, which has been agreed by the council's highway authority. In addition, on the eastern side, there are 2 entrances either side of the office block. There are currently brick wall and pillar, and these are being removed as part of the scheme, which will allow easier access for cars into the site so that they're no longer parking on the outside. So, given the side extension, just to explain, will add 7 metres in width to the warehouse at the rear, but it still leaves a gap with the eastern boundary of over 4 metres. So given the separation distances, the eaves height, as I mentioned, it's 2.8 metres, it's single storey, it's not considered there will be significant impacts to the neighbouring amenity. So this is showing the front from looking on Yorktown Road. So as you can see, car parked in the front, there have been more parked there. And the building that we're considering only is to the rear of the site. So you can see it in the bottom left screen, looking towards it from east to west. And then the building, the rear of the building, where the far right, the white car is parked, that's where the extension will be. So the gap between the new side extension and the hedge on the right, you can see, will be over 4 metres. So I'll just show you the existing proposed elevations. So at the top, we have the front elevation on the left and the proposed to the right. So you can see how hipped the roof is. So as I say, it was previously submitted as a full upright gable-ended wall. That's now been brought back. So if you look at the proposed side elevation in the bottom, there are no side windows proposed at all. So no overlooking from the eastern to the eastern side. Trees and landscaping has been an issue. The applicant has submitted a tree protection plan for the surrounding trees, the off-site trees and hedgerows, which has been accepted by the Council's tree service, and conformity to that plan is conditioned. Now, at this stage, I'd like to draw the members to the attention to the supplementary report. The applicant has now agreed an additional condition for the submission of a landscaping plan along the eastern boundary, and that must be discharged prior to commencement. So landscaping, and the tree service have, in the informative, recommended the trees that could be planted within that over 4 metre gap along the side. So that will soften the plot. I mentioned highway safety, cars parking to the front. I've zoomed in on the site plan there. 11 parking spaces is the required amount. So that shows where they will be located and the manoeuvring within the plot. So they can exit in a first gear and not block the view around the corner at the front at all. The Highways Authority has no objection to the scheme, and the parking plan is conditioned as set out in section 11 of the committee report. So it is our view that the parking provides a safer situation than currently exists, and I say that would be conditioned. So in conclusion, the scheme is considered to accord with the relevant policies of the Bracknell Forest local plan, the Bracknell Forest parking standards, SPD, the design SPD and the NPPF. The proposal is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in section 11 of the committee report and the additional condition in the supplementary report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the officer? No? Gosh, no questions. Just to clarify, what happens when this company moves out? Could the next company put in longer hours and weekends, and could they be noisy? And what happens then?
Madam Chair, the use class of the site is confirmed as office and storage. So we cannot change that, and it has been in that position since 1998. If there are future complaints about noise, then that would be an environmental health issue that could be raised through those.
It doesn't sound as if they should be noisy if they're just office and storage. Any other questions? No? Right. The recommendation? Oh, sorry. So, Councillor now.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is from my ward, and I feel it is important to clarify the rationale behind my vote for this. As a member of Planning Committee, my role demands to review applications through unbiased lens by gauging whether the proposals are compliant with the Council's local plan and national planning policy framework. Neighbouring residents do have concerns with this application, to name few. Loss of trees. The trees in the question are protected trees. The applicant has submitted a tree protection plan for the surrounding off-site trees and hedge grows, and Council's tree service has found it as acceptable. Concerns around extra site traffic, which Highways Authority has rightly objected in the previous proposals. The amended proposal in this application has been found acceptable by the Highways Authority, and I can see there is an S11 condition as well. So overall, all the objections raised were either mitigated or does not fall under the category of material consideration. So therefore, I'll be voting in favor of this application. Thank you.
Sorry, we haven't. I should have stopped you if I. I thought it was going to be a question, but we'll hold on to that.
Okay.
Are there any further questions? I don't think so. No. So, would you like to move the application then?
Yes, Madam Chair. I would like to move this application.
And I will second in that case. Thank you. And we'll accept your comment as having been. Yeah. Anybody else want to speak, please? Councillor Collins.
I would just like to say that again I was disappointed at the site visit that the site had not been opened for us to access the site, and I would like to thank the neighbour who allowed us into their garden through their house to view the actual rear of the site. And I'd also like to thank the officer for changing the requirement for planting from an informative to a condition, because I think that will help the neighbour considerably. I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want to speak? Well, then you're not allowed to anymore. No, I just. I just like to reinforce that it's great that is the landscaping does now include the boundary on next to that neighbour. It's much better. Phew. So shall we take the vote? All those in favour?
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. And that concludes tonight's enormous agenda. Thank you all so very much for taking that through smoothly. Can you wait till we're offline to...